Okay, so we have here the second line of defense. Again, the second line of defense here includes our cellular component of our immune system. That includes here our WBC or the leukocytes. So we can classify your leukocyte belong here to your lymphoid cell lines. That includes here our lymphocytes. That includes your B lymphocyte, your T lymphocyte, and we have also your NK, natural killer. And we could also have your myeloid cell lines, which includes here your non-lymphocytic cells, like for example your granulocytes, neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, including your monocyte and our macrophages. Okay, so we have your tissue macrophages. So tissue macrophages here are just your tissue monocyte. So once they are in peripheral circulation, most likely they are monocyte, but once they try to enter the tissues here, they become your macrophages. So they're identified by their names according to what tissue they are able to take their homing resident. Like for example, in the brain, you have your microglia. In the liver, you have your Kupffer cell. In the skin, you have your Langerhans cells. And we have also your kidney, mesangial cells, and lungs. So you have your alveolar. Okay, the next one, we go to your acquired or your adaptive immunity. Again, our acquired or your adaptive immunity, that would have the following characteristics. So this includes here, number one, this would have a specific type of reaction. And this one is conferred by the memory. And this one is being activated on the second exposure. So what's included here in our acquired or adaptive immunity includes our cell-mediated immunity and humoral-mediated immunity. Humoral-mediated immunity here, that involves your B lymphocyte for the antibody production, and the T lymphocytes involved here in our cell-mediated immunity. Okay, so first we have here your humoral-mediated immunity. So again, your humoral-mediated immunity involve here your B lymphocytes with the production of our antibodies. And our antibody, again, are being produced here in response to your antigenic stimulation upon exposure to your antigen or a foreign pathogen that enters our body. So we have here types of our humoral immunity, or antibody production. So how our antibody is being developed here can be classified as either natural or artificial. So what's the difference between your natural antibody production? Speak about the natural antibody production, antibody is being produced by our body. It's your body that tries to produce an antibody. That's your natural type of your antibody production. Okay, artificial on the other hand, the antibody produced here is coming from a source outside your body that's being given only to you. Okay, then we have your active versus your passive immunity or antibody production. We speak about the active. Okay, so this is a type of the antibody production wherein what is being given to you is not antibody, but antigen. So antigen binigay sa'yo, but then because of the exposure, it's up to your body to develop an antibody against that one. Pag passive naman, so what is directly given to you is already an antibody. Okay, so we have your example of our active natural immunity. So active natural immunity, we have here recovery from a disease. Okay, what makes this one as an active? So pag active, okay, so you get infected by this one of a certain disease. And again, because of the infection, what's being given to you is antigen because of the exposure. So therefore, that become your active. Okay, natural, because again, it's your body. We're going to develop an antibody because of the product of stimulation as a product of exposure. Okay, artificial naman na active, we have here your vaccination. What make your vaccination here artificial? Because again, the vaccine, pag artificial ulit, okay, what is being given to you during the vaccination would be the antigen. But the source of that antigen is, okay, sa labas, coming from an external source. Okay, then we have here active. So, again, what's being active here? Because antigen binibigay sa iyo, it's up to your body to develop an antibody against a vaccine. So, hindi siya automatic na pag nag-vaccine tayo, you will automatically be producing an antibody. Again, it's still up to your body to develop an antibody. Now we go to your passive. So, passive, natural. So, again, being natural. So, again, This is antibody production that so sa katawan natin, hindi siya galing sa labas. Passive, because again, pag passive, ang binibigay na sa'yo is already antibody. So example, we have your transplacental transfer of the antibody from the mother to the baby. So ang binibigay na sa baby is already an antibody coming from the mother. And that's nasa loob na siya ng katawan. That's making that one as our passive natural. Passive artificial, so again, passive because antibody binibigay, and artificial, hindi siya sa katawan, coming from external source. Example, we have your RH immunoglobulin or simply the raw gum to prevent your HDN, RH-HDN. Binibigay sa kanya immunoglobulin, so that's antibody. So pag antibody binibigay sa'yo, that's already passive. And that's outside your body, ang source, so that's your artificial. That would be your, tama ba, is artificial. Then we have your hepatitis B immunoglobulin, and we have also your anti-rabies. So anti-rabies is it's more of the immunization siya, hindi siya vaccination. So again, pag vaccination, antigen binibigay, pag immunization, binibigay sa atin ay antibody or immunoglobulin. Okay, another manifestation of our humoral-mediated immunity, we have your type 1 hypersensitivity reaction. Actually, your type 1 is your immediate type hypersensitivity reaction. It's involved here your IgE antibody. But I guess your type 2 and type 3 hypersensitivity reaction are also part of your humoral mediated immunity because that's what we have, what I have mentioned earlier. Type 2 also involved here the IgM and IgG na antibody. And type 3 also involved here either of your IgM or IgG antibodies. And those are still part of your humoral mediated immunity. Okay, next we go to another type of your acquired or your adaptive immunity. We have your cell-mediated immunity. So cell-mediated immunity, on the other hand, what's being involved in that would be your T lymphocyte. So once the T lymphocyte here try to encounter an antigen or pathogen, it would render here your T lymphocyte to be sensitized. Once you have already your sensitized T lymphocytes, upon the second exposure, again, the first exposure of the antigen, the T lymphocytes will be sensitized or activated. And then once it encounter again the same antigen, the sensitized T lymphocytes, so na-activate na siya on the first encounter. Pero hindi pa rin siya mag-react on the first encounter. However, in the second encounter of the same antigen, which tried to simulate the sensitization of your T lymphocyte, okay, so mag-second encounter na, nakita niya ulit or na-encounter niya ulit, it would allow your sensitized T lymphocyte here to release your lymphokines. Lymphokines, we're talking about specifically the interleukins. Galing siya kay T lymphocyte natin, specifically like interleukin 2. So, and some other interleukins or the lymphokines, general for that is lymphokines because it's being produced by your T lymphocytes. But specifically, that one is your interleukins. Okay, which involved here in the antigen presentation. So, pag sinabi nating antigen presentation, so sa T lymphocyte, tutulong siya para mag-present. Pag sabing present, i-present mo, ganun. Ipakilala mo ang antigen to your macrophages. Okay, mediated by your macrophages that would allow here the elimination of your, eventually your pathogen. Okay, so, ayun. Another type of your cell-mediated immunity, we have here your delayed type hypersensitivity reaction. So, this is your type 4 hypersensitivity reaction. This one's involved here our T lymphocytes. Example, we have your skin tests. Again, this is a type of your allergic reaction, and this one is your cell-mediated immunity. Okay, now we have here the difference between your active versus your passive immunity. So we have here for the active, the advantage of the active, the antibody produced by the active would have a higher strength and longer duration. Medyo matagal siya nawawala in our circulation compared with antibody na produce or nabibigay sa atin through the passive immunity. In terms of the production of the antibody, however, active immunity, since, di ba, ang binibigay sa active ay antigen, so medyo matagal pa and then eventually it's up to your body to produce an antibody. So, disadvantage niya, medyo matagal makapag-produce ng antibody. Pero pag once you produce already an antibody, it has a greater reactivity, greater strength din siya, and a longer reactivity or matagal siya mawala sa katawan ni patient natin, providing you with a longer protection against an infection or reinfection. For the passive naman, since antibody na binigay sa'yo, so okay. So antibody, nandiyan na sa antibody, you don't need your body to produce antibody pa because antibody na binigay sa'yo. However, since antibody na binibigay sa'yo, ang problem with that ay hindi siya tumatagal. And therefore, you need to check your antibody like, okay, every now and then, baka nag-deteriorate na siya, you should be given a booster of that. Okay, then we have here the properties of our acquired or adaptive immunities. The first one, we have specificity. So remember here that your B lymphocyte and your T lymphocytes, okay, they try to react on the second encounter. And they tend to recognize that one because they try to develop already a memory during the first encounter. And therefore, they would only react on the antigen, which is responsible for the stimulation. In order for them to be stimulated, in order for them to be sensitized, okay, so that's your specificity. Okay, the ability of your T lymphocytes, sensitized T lymphocytes and B lymphocyte here to recognize, okay, the same antigen previously during the first encounter would be highly dependent on the epitope and the paratope. We have the term here epitope. So epitope is the binding site of your antigen. Paratope is the binding site of your antibody. So they were able, if this one is your antibody, they were able to recognize your antigen, okay, by the epitope. So yon, epitope, paratope, that serve as the binding site of each of your antigen and each of your antibody. So epitope is the binding site of your antigen and paratope is the binding site of your antibody. Doon sila magbabind to one another. Another property we have here, your diversity, is the variability of the antigen binding sites. So there are some antigen kasi na they have different epitope or antigenic determinants. And therefore, they can allow the binding of, okay, some of your antibodies, especially if that antibody is capable of cross-reactivity. Okay, the memory. Okay, again, property of our acquired or your adaptive immunity would be the memory. So usually that one is being activated only on the second encounter. So pag first encounter pa lang, they will not react, but rather the first immune response would allow the priming of your B lymphocyte and your T lymphocytes. And to say, pag first encounter pa lang, so they get to know each other and it will activate your T and the B lymphocytes. And that with that first encounter, it would allow the development of your memory B cells or your memory T cells wherein they are programmed to recognize, okay, that antigen pag nagkita sila ulit. And only that, nagkakaroon tayo ng activation of your acquired or your adaptive immunity on the second encounter or second exposure. Okay, more rapid, larger, more specific because already nakilala niya na. Because during the first encounter, you have already developed here a memory T cell and a memory B cell. Okay, self-limitation. So, problem, especially for the antibody. So, there's always a limitation for the strength or the reactivity of your antibody. So, you need to check for that because it try to decline over a period of time. It might check here a need for you to have a booster para mag-stimulate ulit, tataas ulit ang titer ng ating antibody because over time, your titer of your antibody tend to deteriorate. Okay, we have your specialization. So each of your antibody will try to react specifically to each of your antigenic stimulus. Discrimination. So again, there is a tendency where you can develop your immunotolerance. So immunotolerance, you could not differentiate between the self and the non-self. So magiging ano siya, it can result here to your autoimmune disorders. So autoimmune disorders characterized here by the destruction of your own cells in your body or tissue in your body because of the presence of the because of the presence of autoreactive na mga antibodies. Okay, then we have here the stages of your acquired immunity or the process of your T and B cell activation and eventually what's going to happen after it's been activated. So start with the recognition phase. So pag sinabi recognition phase, first encounter, okay, orientation sila ni antigen. Okay, antigen bind to your antibody. Okay, so how your B cell and T cell able to recognize that one because of the specific receptor. Okay, for the B cell, they try to have the antibody receptor, and the T cell, we have here your peptide receptor. After they tend to orient to one another, they tend to bind, it would allows the stimulation of your B lymphocyte and the T lymphocyte, or you try to prime that one. And later on, okay, it would allow, pag na-activate na ang T lymphocytes sa B lymphocytes, ito magiging outcome. Number one, your B or T lymphocytes na activated would eventually try to proliferate and dadami siya. It try to produce here specific clone para dadami siya. Para in case na makakita siya ulit ng same antigen na yun ay madami na siyang clone to eventually kill the antigen on the second exposure. Or ito pinaka-outcome, they can eventually develop here to become memory cells. Okay, and after that one, hindi lang nag-end on with the binding of your antigen antibody, but rather also try to activates also the effector phase here, where it can activates also other processes para ma-eliminate or ma-remove ang pathogen sa katawan natin. It can activate your phagocytes in order for that to perform here the phagocytosis. It can also activate our complement system and also can have here your inflammatory reactions because of the presence of your pathogen inside your body. Okay, so thank you.